Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Richard E. Grant. Can you ever forgive me? Look at that, standing ovation. That is how we roll at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, Mr. Grant.
Okay, you can all come again. Thank you.
Well, you heard the applause. You heard the reaction. And I before we got on stage here, I said, the SAG-AFTRA Foundation audience is the most passionate audience you will find anywhere in Hollywood. So
why?
Thank you so much. Because they're actors. I mean, you know, you're preaching to the choir with such a
Okay.
Well, first of all, I have to say, you know, I saw this movie at Telluride in the beginning of September, and I thought it was so profound, so beautiful, a really unique film, and a love story that is totally relatable by any measure. And just what has it been like for you since these last couple of months, sort of making the rounds and having the film play out, and the reactions you've been getting?
It is completely surreal because I've been doing this. I'm almost 62 years old. I've been doing this for so long, and anybody in this room will know what just hanging in there is. You know, I can remember reading an interview with Bette Davis before she died, and that somebody said, you know, what's your greatest achievement? I'm not comparing myself to Bette Davis, goodness sake, but she just said surviving it, and I understand that because it's, you know, somebody brilliantly quipped that you've got to have the hide of a rhino and the soul of Tinkerbell to kind of survive the shit that you have to put up with, I think. You know.
I mean, come on. And when you first read the screenplay written by Nicole Holofcener and Jeff Whitty, and you read the role of Jack Hawk, like, what was your sort of first impression of Jack Hawk, and what did you think of the screenplay?
Well, first of all, it was exactly this time, November, 2 years ago. My agent in London said, there's a script that you've got to read in 24 hours. And make a decision. I said, well, what is it, like Mission Impossible? Is the thing going to blow up? And she said, no, you have to read it and make a decision. And I said, well, who's dead? Who's dropped out? She said, leave your paranoia out the door and just face ahead. You know, she said, remember, Albert Finney turned down Lawrence Arabia and it didn't do too badly for Peter O'Toole. I said, well, this is not really like that. But anyway, so I read it, and then I saw Nicole Holofcener and Jeff Whitty. I knew that he'd written Avenue Q, the musical, and Marielle Heller had directed Diary of a Teenage Girl. And then it said Melissa McCarthy, and I thought, well, whoever has dropped out is an idiot. So I said yes, of course, instantly. And what struck me is that, you know, I always try and think of, possibly because of where I grew up in Africa, that try and imagine what kind of animal a person is when you're meeting them for the first time. And I thought that, if anything, Jack Hawk was a kind of Labrador, in that he would go up to anybody, he would try and schmooze them, lick them into submission, shag them, fleece them, eat them, whatever's required. And he has this unlikely, you know, incredible journey adventure with this porcupine of a person who's just so prickly and doesn't want to know anybody and is like, ugh. And even when you get close, you're still going to have blood on your hands. So that was my idea. And then I was very inspired by trying to find a movie equivalent of what this relationship seemed to be about. Two incredibly lonely, isolated people in a city of probably the most densely populated outside of Hong Kong or Shanghai, as New York City is or was. And the Dustin Hoffman, John Voight characters from a movie that was made before all of you were born, called
Midnight
Cowboy. Thank you very much. Just absolutely, I thought it captured this sort of weird, interdependent, codependent relationship these two people had. So that's how we started. That's how it started off in my head, of trying to find a route into who and what these people were, because Lee Israel was very parsimonious in her book. She wrote very articulately and expansively about herself, but in terms of Jack Hawk, it was basically Portland, Oregon, dead at the age of 47 from AIDS in 1994, used a little stubby cigarette holder, and was really smart once she had been caught by the FBI of going and fencing these letters, and she thought she'd get 200, 300, 500 bucks for them. He'd come back with $2,000. So I thought from that, he obviously knows how to go out and sort of slenter around and schmooze people to, get their money. So that's what I went on.
Well, the interesting thing is that on paper, Jack Hawk, not the most super likable person, but
and neither of them are.
But what was the point of connection for you to sort of make him the charming, likable person that we see, especially when Jack hooks up with Lee Israel?
I think that a guy that I was at drama school with 100 years ago, who still owes me money, he was just one of those guys that you knew that he was going to fleece you. You knew that you wouldn't give the keys to your apartment or your car or, whatever money you gave, you knew you were never going to see back. But somehow there's something so vulnerable and likable and charming about this kind of personality that you kind of go, oh, all right, okay, have it. But it's a bit, always the feeling of like a dog going down a sand dune like this. You're never going to get the money back. And so you kind of willingly hand it over knowing, I think like going to Vegas. You arrive there and you're never going to see that cash back. So that was the feeling that I had about him. And I thought, well, if you go into a bar, if he was unfriendly or unattractive to other people, then he wouldn't get a drink out of anybody. So he obviously knew how to try and do that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this, watching this movie, so there's that scene where Lee and Jack are on the street and they're talking, and Jack is, just like, very sort of like carefree, and Lee sort of goes on her way, and there's a moment of just sort of like melancholy as Jack sort of like takes a beat and he walks down the street by himself, and there's no words. And it's heartbreaking, just sort of like the loneliness that they each feel that connects them.
Yeah, and I think that that what we found in doing it, that the act of friendship that he offers, if you like, when he has nothing really to offer other than even when the pet guy or the guy that's getting rid of all the cat shit or whatever says, no, you've got to clean up first before we come in and get rid of the flies. He bangs on the door and he says, I'll come and do it. Even he puts lavatory paper up his nose, which wasn't in the script. That seems to, I think that was a point where it was just, they would survive as friends. And I love the line that was scripted where she says to him, this was not an unpleasant, it was like a double negative. And it's just I thought that was a very smart way of identifying who these people were.
With Mario Heller, I just felt like in terms of capturing that early 90s New York that does not exist anymore, especially if you go to like Times Square, it's like Disneyland. Working with her, how she captured the atmosphere of it, and what made her like really like a great actor's director.
She's very young for a start, which is astonishing because she's somebody she's like a young person with an old soul, and she's innately compassionate, collaborative, kind, nurturing, nourishing, all the things that, in my experience, whether it's kids, dogs, or actors, you get a good result out of that. Whereas if you shout at people or you abuse them, you're not going to get such a good result, I don't think. And yet she wore her authority very lightly in that you knew exactly who was in charge of the whole enterprise, but somehow she just... it was a 6-week shoot. It was 28 days. I shot about 14 of them. And you felt that because essentially every scene was a duologue between two characters, or maybe three at the most, that you never felt that obviously on everybody will know here that when you're shooting, there's always, there's never enough time. But we did feel that there was time on this. And that's a great gift that she has. So I loved her for that.
A lot of people have sort of remarked in like articles and reviews that, Melissa McCarthy, it's a real departure for her. Where, if you saw St. Vincent 4 years ago, it's really not. But this is definitely a little bit more in the dramatic direction. And it really does sort of like hinge on the chemistry that you two have, because this is a love story, really. And like just working with her, I mean, I know you're both sort of like really into the improv thing. Were you able to do that, or did you really like sort of stick to Nicole and Jeff's screenplay?
Well, firstly, she was a nightmare to work with.
Poor thing.
She was. What you see on the screen is no acting. That is who she is. She's miserable. She's grumpy. She has terrible breath. She doesn't know her lines. She hated me. No, it was, I just worshipped her. And we had this situation where I flew in the middle of January last winter, and I said to Marielle Heller, the director, so when do I meet Melissa and when do we rehearse? And she said, oh, no, she's on other projects. She's coming on Friday for costume and wig fittings. You will meet her on Monday morning. And I said, no, you don't understand. The level of my paranoia and terror is so deep. I won't sleep for 72 hours. I won't be able to work on Monday. Please, just even 10 minutes. Can we just meet and have some idea of how she's going to play the part or her approach? So mercifully, Melissa had the exact same impulse, and they made some time, and we then met and we had a meal together. And it's a weird thing that when you meet somebody that you feel as if you've known them your whole life, and within 3 nanoseconds we were like that. And so she's pregnant with my twins at the moment, and so it's been absolutely amazing. I've loved it. And when we were in Telluride, to go back to what you asked me right at the beginning, we saw it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is this tiny ski resort up in the mountains of Colorado. I'd never been there before. And they did a photo shoot of all the actors. And I said, well, how's that going to be? And then Robert Redford just sauntered in, and Sissy Spacek, and I thought, what the fuck? Everybody's here. And it's like, these are people that I have admired all my life. So the intimacy, as you know, when I met you there as well. So Melissa and I sat and watched the film with an audience for the first time, and you in a school hall converted into a cinema, and we had no idea what the response would be. And I said, when did the reviews and stuff come out? One of the producers said, oh, not for another month. And somebody else said, within 2 hours, Variety and Hollywood Reporter would review on this. And we could feel people laughing in the first section of the film, and then we heard people cry, which completely floored us. And from then onwards, I think there's been one middling review, but I mean, there are about 75 of them that is it feels like a tidal wave of love for this movie. So I've never experienced that. I never will again. And so I'm savoring every muscle of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because it's rare, it doesn't happen.
Yes.
It doesn't happen to me.
Wow. I mean,
Thank you for coming.
Enjoy this, because everyone's always like thinking about the next thing and what's happening tomorrow and the phone ringing and all that stuff. But yeah, this is such a well-deserved, well-earned a love fest for this movie. And it is, like I said, a unique love story. And it's almost 2 different love stories going on too, because I gotta say, Dolly Wells was just lovely in this movie.
Yeah, she was so good.
She's so good. I mean, I know you didn't get to do a whole lot with her acting-wise, but watching the movie and the times that you did work with her, what was that like?
She is, she's one of those people that doesn't really finish a sentence. She goes off on one, and somehow you end up talking about cocoons and caterpillars, and then she brings it round and you go, where's she gone? And then she comes back to it and you realize that but that's just the way her mind works. So she's very articulate in an unconventional way. And I think that she was incredibly sensitive in the way that she played her part. And I admired her enormously.
When you're talking about a film like Midnight Cowboy, or the other one, I mean, it's sort of a given, is The Odd Couple. Just in sort of mismatched people who just like complement each other. We were also talking before this about how unique this story is. Like, there's really never been sort of like a depiction of a connection of 2 characters like this, like ever in a movie.
You mean the fact that it's a lesbian woman and a gay man as
exactly.
almost the central characters in a story,
And that they have this connection between them.
and I thought the other thing that the screenplay and the way that Murray directed it was that the issue of their sexuality seemed to be they just are and who they were. It wasn't made into a. Do you know what I mean? There was no Maria Callas or Judy Garland on the soundtrack to go, this is what we're having here. Or Katie Lang is going to be for this bit. I'm being facetious, but you get what I'm saying. It's just like, these are people, who they were, and fuck them, take them or leave them. And I loved that. I thought that it was so smart to do it that way.
What made you want to become an actor? Was it a movie, a TV show, a performance that made you go, ding?
I have no idea, and I still don't know. When you read something, and I don't know what it was like for you in the room here, but when you read something and then you get the clothes and whatever they give you to do, and I asked for the little cigarette holder and the scarf for the final scene, because I had a great friend who died of AIDS and wore one of those. But when you actually do it, I have no idea where it comes from or what it is. I think if I could, I'd put it in a bottle, because it's like on every job you think, what the fuck, how did I do the last one? And once you start going, you go, and people go, oh, that was good, or that wasn't so good, and you go, oh, I see, but knowing it, I don't know how you judge that. So to try and answer your question properly, when I was 7 years old, I had shoe boxes that I made into theatres with a bedside lamp, cut a hole in the top, did the drawing of the scenery, and had lollipop sticks with cut-out figures, and did, from either side. Then I went to glove puppets, then string puppets, and school plays. So when I look back on it, it's a very clear progression. But I grew up in a country called Swaziland in Southeast Africa, which is the smallest country in the Southern Hemisphere. And saying that you wanted to be an actor was as ludicrous as saying that you wanted to be an astronaut because Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969 when I was 12. So it's, the fact that I've ended up having a career doing this is an astonishment to me, because when I finished drama school, the professor gave this sort of analysis of what he thought your career could be. And he said, you've directed and you've written stuff. That is, I think, where your career is going to go. You look too weird to be an actor. And I said, well, Donald Sutherland's 6 foot something and has a long face. And he said, yeah, you look a bit like a mortician's assistant, And so the first movie I ever did 32 years ago, with Neil and I playing an out-of-work actor, thank you. All the reviews said, slack-jawed, tombstone featured, mortician's assistant, all this stuff came back, and I thought, fuck 'em, I've done it. So,
Well, you got to work with the late great Robert Altman.
Yeah.
Not once, but twice.
3 times.
2 times.
Yeah. Gosford Park, The Player, and Ready to Wear.
Oh, Ready to Wear, 1993. Yep. So, the Player was the first time in 92.
Yeah.
What was it like to not just work with him, but just over the course of basically a decade? How did that change?
He used to call me E. Grant. He, anybody in this room who knew him or worked with him, he loved actors, and he liked tall, pipe cleaner shaped actors as well, of both sexes. So I thought that was fucking wonderful, that you didn't have to look like Robert Redford. He was also somebody that he dispensed with all the hierarchy and this pyramid of movie star and then everybody else in the mudflats, so that everybody there was a 2-tier salary system where on Ready to Wear, Julia Roberts got a certain salary, and Sophia Loren, and then the next tier was me and everybody else, Lyle Lovett and all those other guys. But the discrepancy wasn't that big. There was one marquee, there was one line of table, so you'd be standing behind Lauren Bacall waiting to have your makeup done. And so the ethos of it was, I'm not wasting time or money, which he didn't have, on all the paraphernalia of Winnebagos and assistants and all the stuff that, happens in some movies. And it was like going back to a theatre troupe where everybody's the same. And so the feeling of democracy and that your contribution is as valued as the next person, which you think would be usual in the way art is made, isn't. And again, the other thing that he did was every night people were invited to the dailies or the rushes to go and see. So he said, not everybody's scenes are going to be in the final movie, but at least they will have had an audience once. And you know what that's like when you've been in something and your best bits, or you think, why have they cut this bit out? And you think, oh my God, but at least it's been seen. And also he was very smart because he used the fact that an audience seeing it also told him very, very quickly what scenes worked and what didn't work. So, and also he had dope every night. He always employed magicians, musicians, same thing. So that on a Sunday night, wherever we were, there would be a party and free entertainment. It was fucking genius. I loved it.
Well, if the third time you worked with him on Gosford Park,
yeah,
you and the entire cast won a SAG award for best cast in a theatrical movie. So, I mean, congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Thank you.
But what was the film that you made right before Can You Ever Forgive Me, and how did you make the transition from that movie to this one?
It was a Wolverine movie called Logan, and it cost, I think, quite a lot of money, and the crew were 300 guys. They all had arms thicker than my thighs, which I know is not enormous, but they were, it was a testosterone-charged environment with stunts guys and trucks and machinery and fucking cranes going in all directions, and I've never felt so macho in my whole life. So to go from that to then working with a female-centric production company where the writer or co-writer, star, producers, director, half the crew, and the subject matter were about a woman in New York with no special effects and no guns, a white-collar crime, if you like, because nobody got hurt.
Right, yeah.
And Judge Judy came to the premiere in New York. It was brilliant. And I said, as you do, Judge Judy, may I call you that? She said yes. I said, Judge Judy, what would you have done with Lee Israel in this situation? She said, I'd let her off with a minor fine. I said, why? Sorry, I can't do the accent. But she said, because she didn't hurt anybody, and she out-scammed scammers, because she said the whole world of literary forgeries and literary authenticity is a grey area to begin with. So she said she was just smart enough to outright and to outsmart these people for some time. So she felt enormous sympathy for her. So
I think we all feel enormous sympathy for Lee. In fact,
yeah.
As the movie goes on, as she sort of does more and more of the forgeries, you all know it's only a matter of time before the gig is up.
Yeah.
And when she gets that phone call from the bookseller, hey, I need you to come in here. It's really important. And you're like, oh, well, here it is. But in this case, I mean, we've all seen the film now, but I feel like the punishment sort of fit the crime. I mean, she didn't get off like Judge Judy would have done, but she certainly didn't do hard time either. It was just sort of right for what the movie was.
And wasn't Melissa brilliant in that in the scene in the courtroom? The camera just comes in on her. There's no cutaways, and she turns that thing of supposedly to be filled with remorse, which supposedly you should be, and she just says, "Well, this I felt really proud. It's the best work that I've ever done." I love that. And also the David Yonell, the producer who knew Lee for 20 years and encouraged her to write the book, and then asked if they could make a movie out of it. All the music that you hear in the film, other than the soundtrack that's been written, was, I love the soundtrack. The original songs by Blossom Deer and the other singers, these romantic, yearning love songs were in her personal record collection. So you knew that, despite all that, and only really showing love for the cat, there was this enormous romantic spirit yearning inside that, and I thought it was such a poignant choice to have that.
Oh, absolutely was. We take questions.
Okay,
From
I give
the
answers.
audience. SAG-AFTRA Foundation questions. First question is from
Thank you for
Vanessa
coming.
Williams.
Can I just thank you for coming, because when they said, I was told by Fox Searchlight, there's this thing at, you have to be at 11 o'clock in the morning. I thought, who the fuck is going to come here now? And then I thought, if they're actors, there's a joke in England, I don't know if it exists here, so I've interrupted you, where they say, why do actors not open curtains in the morning so they've got something to do in the afternoon? And I thought, So I'm thrilled that so many of you have come.
Packed house today.
Okay.
You know how to...
Sorry, your question.
Yeah. So Vanessa Williams, where are you, Vanessa? Are you here? Right. So I'm calling out Vanessa.
So is this going to be embarrassing, Vanessa?
Not at all. Not at all. The question is, where did you study or develop your way of working?
Did I answer that? Yes. Oh, didn't say where. Well, I grew up in Swaziland, and 1,200 miles south of that, in Cape Town, there was a university where you could do a combined theatre diploma, which was 3 years, and also an arts degree. So I combined those and did those for 4 years, and then co-founded a multiracial theatre company in 1980 when I was there for 2 years after I had graduated. So that's... Yes, I do. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Next question is from Melina. Melina's question, this sort of goes back to something you said at the top of the conversation.
Is it only female people who are allowed to ask a question? Where's Melina?
Not including me.
Okay.
Do you have any advice for when you have a sort of slow point in the career, a rough patch, that sort of thing?
I think you just have to get inured to the fact that no is invisibly tattooed across most people's heads. They don't want you to succeed. They don't want you to have the job or to get the job. And I think once you make peace with that in your head, and my daughter, who's now a casting director, she said to me, it seems that everything is personal in what we do, but somehow you've got to trick your brain or your heart into not taking it personally when they go, we want you, but just not that version of you. We want somebody else who's, you've all been through this. So I think that just doing it, like the old Nike ad says, just do it, stick at it. And I'm living proof that you can be sitting at SAG-AFTRA at 61 and 3/4 years old and, still be there.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this conversation. Richard E. Grant, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.